Hey everyone, welcome back again to complete our oral surgery series for your board exam preparation. Today we will talk about very important topic which is muscles of the tongue. First of all, you have to know that the muscles of the tongue are mostly innervated by the hypoglossal nerve, which is cranial nerve number 12, which is the main nerve innervating the muscles of the tongue. We have only one exception, just one muscle is innervated by the vagus nerve, which is cranial nerve number 10. We will talk about this later on, but you should know that the innervation is mainly by hypoglossal nerve, and one exception is the vagus nerve. We have to know the types of tongue muscles before details. Muscles of the tongue are either intrinsic muscles or extrinsic muscles. What are the intrinsic muscles and what are the extrinsic muscles? The intrinsic muscles are longitudinal muscles and transverse muscles and vertical muscles, while the extrinsic muscles are Hyoglossus muscle, Genuglossus muscle, Styloglossus muscle, and Palatoglossus muscle. Then what is the function of intrinsic muscle and the extrinsic muscle? The intrinsic muscles alter the tongue shape. They are responsible for the tongue shape, while the extrinsic muscles are altering tongue position, which is their function. What intrinsic means? Intrinsic means that these muscles are all originating and inserting into the tongue, while the extrinsic means they originate from the outside of the tongue and inserted into the tongue, which is the main difference between intrinsic muscles and extrinsic muscles. To easily memorize the extrinsic muscles, say, "Hi, my tongue is GPS." Hi refers to Hyoglossus muscle, and G refers to Genuglossus muscle, P Palatoglossus muscle, S Styloglossus muscle. This is for easy memorizing the names of extrinsic muscles. Let's talk about our first extrinsic tongue muscle, which is Hyoglossus muscle. As you see in this shape, the origin of it is from the hyoid bone. Okay, they are inserted into the tongue. As we said before, when muscle is in action, it moves from the insertion to origin. So imagine this action from insertion to origin. Here, the movement of the tongue will be to downward. So the action of Hyoglossus muscle is tongue depression. This is very easy. And of course, the innervation is by hypoglossal nerve. Another diagram here, the origin is hyoid bone, insertion is tongue, action is tongue depression, innervation by hypoglossal nerve. Our second muscle is Genuglossus muscle. As you see in this drawing, it originates from the genial tubercle, which is a bony protuberance here under the area of incisors, lower incisors, originates from genial tubercle and inserted into the tongue. And the action is this direction from the insertion to origin. So imagine that the tongue is moving to in this direction. So the action is tongue protrusion, and of course the innervation is by hypoglossal nerve. Here is another diagram telling us the origin from genial tubercle, or another name is mental spine, and insertion is the tongue, action is tongue protrusion, and innervation is by hypoglossal nerve, which is cranial nerve number 12. Here is a diagram about the genial tubercle. It's here in the inner surface of your mandible. Third muscle is Styloglossus muscle. From its name, let's see this diagram. Styloid process of temporal bone, which is the origin, and the insertion is the tongue. So imagine the action. The muscle moves from the insertion to origin, and the tongue will move in that direction. So the action is tongue retraction, and of course the innervation is by hypoglossal nerve. So if you want to know what is the styloid process is that red colored structure here, which is the origin of styloglossus muscle, and it inserts into the tongue. So the action will be that direction, which means tongue retrusion. Here is another diagram telling that the origin is styloid process of temporal bone, and insertion is tongue, action tongue retraction, innervation is by hypoglossal nerve. The last muscles of extrinsic muscles, which is the palatoglossus muscle. As you see in this diagram, the palatoglossus muscle is a very important muscle. It originates from the palatine aponeurosis. What is the palatine aponeurosis? It's a fibrous lamella, which is thin and firm fibrous lamella, or called a flat sheet tendon-like material that anchors a muscle. So the origin of palatoglossus muscle is the palatine aponeurosis here from upward. It's the posterior border of the hard palate, and insertion is into the tongue. So you can imagine that the action is in this direction, which is tongue elevation, but the palatoglossus muscle is only characterizing by elevation of back part of the tongue only. This photo is telling you what is the palatine aponeurosis here in the posterior part of the hard palate. In this diagram, it tells us that the palatoglossus muscle is anterior to the palatine tonsils, and it marks the end of oral cavity proper. What is the oral cavity proper? It's the tongue and your palate, like in this photo. The green color here is the oral cavity proper, and its border is palatoglossus muscle. So the origin of palatoglossus muscle is palatine aponeurosis, insertion is tongue, action is elevation of back part of the tongue, innervation is cranial nerve number 10, which is the vagus nerve. It has anterior relation to the palatine tonsils and marks, of course, the oral cavity proper. So we have finished the extrinsic muscle. Let's move to intrinsic muscle. We have a cross section here telling us what are the intrinsic muscle. So focus with me. The longitudinal muscles are here, which I'm pointing by red. The direction of longitudinal muscle fibers are is like this. They are called longitudinal. Look at the transverse lines which are here in the photo. They refer to the transverse fibers, and look at the vertical lines here in the photo which refer to the vertical fibers. So we have finished talking about the intrinsic muscles and extrinsic muscles of the tongue. Here we reach the end of our video, and thank you for watching. If you are more interested in dentistry, please like and subscribe our videos to get anything new about your board exam preparation and more in dentistry in general. Thank you and goodbye.